I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. Sue Nicol back to the Isle of Man College. Some of you will know Sue very well. She was for many years Programme Manager in Health and Social Care at the college, teaching social policy and welfare history, among other things. She's latterly been working with Manx National Heritage in their library and archives, and in recent years she's also managed to find the time to complete a PhD with the University of Liverpool in the School of Law and Social Justice. And I'm very pleased to say that she's going to be sharing some of her PhD research with us this evening.
So thank you very much indeed. Thank you ever so much for coming out tonight. Those who know me know already that I could talk the hind legs off a donkey and the front legs a bit of a wobble too. So because of that, I'm going to keep to a bit of a schedule to try and discipline myself. Because of that, it will probably be easier for me if I'm dealing with questions and clarifications at the end. Is that acceptable with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. I should also mention at this early stage is the Isle of Man is a small place, but in fact wherever children are in my research, they have got their names. Right. I don't wish to be insensitive. The names are actually in the public domain anyway. But I tended to feel that they were more sinned against than sinning. And whilst when they were sent to reformatories, they were taken, their names were removed and they were given a number, like in jail, I've given them their names back. I gave it this title partly because a bit of a homage to the Victorians. You know, they used to like writing improving stories for children, and they'd very often have that two-level title. But in many ways that's the point of what I want to talk about and show you my research about, which is boys will be boys is a sort of Gaelic shrub type of phrase, isn't it? Hijinks, bit of mischief, Dennis the Menace, just William. Quite entertaining as long as you're not on the receiving end of it. Whereas juvenile delinquent is a label that's much darker, more connected with anxieties, much more of an identity-changing label. So what I wanted to do tonight, is to talk to you about a point in the Isle of Man's history when they started identifying some children as boys being boys and others as juvenile delinquents. In 1890, there was a significant change affecting children on the island. And at that point, what I'd like to do is to talk about how the difference worked, which children were characterised as juvenile delinquents, and what that can tell us about Manx society in 1890. What changes were happening that they should do this? This third one isn't one to explore tonight, but I just wanted to lay it out there. Contemporary public policy about youth justice very rarely looks at the past, and I think it needs to. I think history is far more important than our policymakers understand. Let me give you an example. Across Europe, people are devising policy based on the same logics, similar rationalities, and a lot of similar evidence. You probably know that in the Isle of Man and the British Isles, the age of criminal responsibility starts at, does anybody know? 6. No, 10. 10. Yeah, 10. And all European countries are different. I think France is 12, Scandinavia, Holland I think is 15, Spain 16, Belgium's 18. I think that the reason for some of the difference needs to be found in the history, those deep-seated socio-cultural norms that we've had for generations. Sadly, I think our public policy writers currently tend not to take that on board. So I'll just leave that there for the moment and I will get off my soapbox, I promise. In 1890, the law changed in the Isle of Man, and a number of children were sent to a reformatory because there wasn't a reformatory in the Isle of Man. That meant a reformatory in England, and the nearest reformatory was the Akbar, which was an Admiralty hulk moored in the Mersey. the law required that children were sent for 5 years, irrespective of what they'd actually done. So that represented quite a dramatic change. Now, if you think about it logically, there's going to be one of 3 reasons. Either you've got an increase in a problem, more children doing worse things, or at least anxiety about it. And I can tell you that was not the case. Your second possibility is that somebody's come up with a new idea, a new solution. Well, in fact, the reformatories have been going for the best part of 40 years. They weren't new. Which makes us think about the third possibility, is that there were agencies and bodies that would benefit by this change in policy. And that's probably what I'm going to show you. Don't have many pictures of the boys, but that's one picture. We don't know who the boys are, so we don't know if any of the Manx boys are in that photograph, but they might be. They look awfully young, don't they? For 5 years. So what I'll do, if it's okay, is spend a couple of minutes drawing in the background to what these reformatories were and what they were trying to do. You might know that there'd been a long, slow revolution right from the mid-18th century, affecting justice, crime. On the one hand, justice actually became more accessible and more professional, with the night watchmen slowly morphing into policemen. It was actually easy to catch people. But actually the way people were living was different. People were more mobile. These larger urban sprawls meant it was much more difficult for those informal controls that you'd get. You still do a bit in the Isle of Man. There are places where people know who does what. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Ring a bell? Mm-hmm. Those informal controls can be very powerful, but they were getting weaker and weaker through the 18th century with urbanisation and population shifts. So, summary justice actually improved, policing improved, and prisons changed dramatically. You probably know that before about 1750, prisons were essentially just a holding tank. It's where you got held until you were tried, executed, transported, or got somebody to pay your fine for you. And they were just, you know, places where you're all lumped in together. And prisons were turning into something more what we would recognise nowadays, where the actual prison sentence itself is your penalty, and you are meant to be in a cell, you're meant to be on your own so you can think about what you've done. And your day is rigidly structured. But amongst all of this change and revolution, the issue of children was part of that discussion. Because as long as there's people breaking the laws, some of them have been quite small. And by the early 19th century, there were a lot of voices raised. Some were concerned about children from a welfare point of view, that children were left virtually destitute in the streets, they were stealing to survive, they were vulnerable to the sort of Fagin's gang type of criminals. There were others who were concerned that some children were like little adults. They were swearing, they were smoking, they were consorting with prostitutes, and they were hardened, and it was unnatural. And you got a number of people like Mary Carpenter, daughter of a Unitarian minister in Bristol, from an evangelical point of view, saying we should do something to save these children. People like Matthew Hill Davenport, a recorder in Birmingham, saying we need to be looking at how justice works for these children. John Clay, who was a chaplain in Lancashire. And you got people going to visit initiatives in Europe, like in Germany and France, where people were setting up colonies for children to divert them from prison, where they could be taught moral behaviours, right from wrong, taught a skill, and be prepared to enter adult life as an honest citizen. And it meant that by 1854, you get the first act, in this case the Youthful Offenders Act, which legitimised voluntary associations setting up reformatories. Now these were meant to be an alternative to prison, a place where children would go, be in a structured environment. Very often they were designed to be in the country. They were meant to be farms. The idea being that country air is good for you and you're away from the evils of the city. Problem was, by the time this act came into being, the hardliners had won. And if you look at it, it looks a lot more like just prison for children. As I say, it was 5 years for whatever the crime. Generally, for most of the period, the child had spent 2 weeks in jail, in an adult jail. If they tried to escape, they would be sentenced to hard labour in an adult jail. And the regime was really quite tough. Now, because of that, a lot of people felt that's the children that are already hardened criminals. That's not what we were looking for, to save children, to divert them from a life of crime. So a couple of years later, Mary Carpenter and Matthew Hill Davenport had been fighting hard for an alternative to this, and a second law came on to produce industrial schools. Again, these weren't to be run by the government, these were for voluntary associations, but this was for children who were found begging, children who were perhaps being a little bit naughty. And it's a question of diverting them. This was a much softer regime. It wasn't anything to do with prisons, it was the poor law that was going to run these for much younger children. Now, having given you that background, can I bring you back to the Isle of Man? From what I can tell, and I'm sure you won't be surprised, as long as there are prison and police records, there are small people in there as well as grown-ups. Children as young as 7, 8, 9 in there. Not a lot. Very often in 2s and 3s. Boys being boys. Very often it's pilfering, it's stealing. So the Isle of Man already has a series of sanctions for these children. Does anybody guess what the most common one was? We had it for well into the 20th century. You're absolutely right. 3, 4, 5, 6 strokes of the birch was one of the most common. They would also get a day in jail. That was an alternative. It was a day in jail, which in those days was most of the 19th century was Castle Rushen jail. Not very salubrious. It was only a day. They might get discharged, which I don't think meant getting let off. I think it meant that their parents were going to chastise them. So, and is there anything else? Oh yes, they might even fine children. So there was already a system for dealing with children. So why did the Isle of Man change things? The reason why I particularly wanted to have both of these on the board is because it's very important to bear in mind the first time the Isle of Man showed any interest in this, it was not this one, it was this one. It wasn't until 1880, it was quite a long time after. And it was Governor Locke. What he wanted to do was to turn the children's home and have it certified as an industrial school. Really important for me to emphasise, he wasn't proposing any change to what the home was doing. He was trying to give it an income source. For children being sent to either of these would get something like, for most of the time, 5 shillings per capita a week. Does anybody know how old, does anybody else know how old that the Isle of Man Children's Home, the orphanage, is? Does anybody know when it started? What would you guess?
1868.
Perfect. There's something to realise you should know as well. 1868. Now, in 1880 it was in financial difficulties, and had been financial difficulties every year of its life since it started. Perhaps it's best if I just draw a bit of a background in case you're not familiar. A chap called David Russell. He was employed by the Home Mission Society to preach and serve the poor of Douglas. He was living in James Street, I think, at the time. But as he, and obviously I'm emphasising he was not a rich philanthropist, he was a man who worked and lived modestly. But in as much as he got to know Douglas and the area around the quays, he got to see destitute and needy and ragged and hungry children. And if I understand the inferences correctly, he was basically just taking them in and feeding them himself. And he went to the Home Mission and said, look, you can't preach the gospel to hungry children. Obviously, you know. One of the greatest needs in Douglas is somewhere for the children. Can you make part of my job managing a home for children? And the Home Mission agreed. And that was the start of what we now know as the Isle of Man Children's Home. He moved to across to the South Quay at some point, to slightly larger premises. He had a small committee of people like shopkeepers and what have you. There were lots of collecting boxes around Douglas. But on the whole, David Russell seems to be the type of person that took the child in and then worried about where the money was coming from. And there was never enough money coming in. So now does it seem logical why Governor Locke said, if we can get the whole certified like this, then if the courts want to send a child who's begging or vagrant, we can actually attach a small amount of money. Not a lot, but something. The committee, the Home, hope that the Industrial Schools Act just passed into law will prove a great help to them should they be enabled to take advantage of it, by giving them power to protect those destitute children they take in from selfish and criminal relatives, and also providing partly at least for the support of such children as the authorities may arrange with the committee to place in a home, rather than send them to prison. So the island's first foray wasn't into the punitive reformatory, it was into trying to support the home that was taking the children from the courts who were in trouble because they were hungry or they were just not being looked after, they were deficit, what was thought to be deficit parents. You realise, of course, there had to be a Manx Act because the Isle of Man did not seek to be covered by the English Acts early. The Isle of Man had no interest at that point. So Locke had to write the bill. He sent it to the Home Office out of courtesy. They nitpicked every single paragraph. So he wrote back in one sentence basically and said, well, you obviously know nothing about the Isle of Man. And it became an act. It was a bit of a raggedy act and it did need sorting out in a year or two. And one of the problems, well, one of the things was the Home Office in England said, well, it's a bit of a mixture between an industrial home and an industrial school and a reformatory. Well, that's an accent. And they also said that he should be using more of the poor law. It wasn't whole lot on the Isle of Man, which is why he said they obviously knew nothing about the island. So the first time the island is moving towards these new initiatives, it is not the punitive reformatory, it is the supportive asylum of the industrial schools. Unfortunately, in 1883, there's what I would regard as a bit of a tragedy, because Russell died. I don't think he'd reached 50, about 48 or something. The obituaries talked about him being exhausted and ill. That in itself was a tragedy. There's no other way of saying it. The tragedy was also the person they appointed to replace him, because the person that appointed to replace him did not want to have anything to do with children coming from the courts. Samuel Campbell came from Scotland. He was a very, very able man. And once he arrived, the financial difficulties of the home stopped. He knew how to manage. Not only did the financial difficulties stop, I would say that the profile of the home rose. It became the talked about place. It became the place where very important people wanted to be associated and wanted to patronise it. For example, when David Russell had his annual general meeting, it would be in a schoolroom, and half the committee didn't turn up. But when Campbell was having an annual general meeting, it was a very grand affair, with MHKs and all sorts there. You know, sort of, you don't want to miss this type of affair. So he was a very, very, very able man. But in order to do that, he changed the brand of the home. If I just can demonstrate, if that's clear enough, that's the front page of the report, the annual report for the home for 1881. Can you see that lovely little beehive with little bees buzzing around at the bottom? That was very much the logo of the home. Why do you think they chose the bees?
Industry.
Industry. Yes. People all working together. Busy, happy little hive as well. Happy little hive of bees. This is now the new logo in 1884. All right. Quite sad, isn't it? The beehive's still there, but it's on the inside page now. Can I show you this? It's a bit later on, but I just wonder what you make of this. That's 1893. I don't know if you've seen that photograph before. Can I just ask you, because I've got you here and you're a trapped audience, do you think that's an authentic photograph? Do you think it's posed?
Yeah.
Do you think they're the children off the streets?
No.
I'm glad it's not just me.
Yeah, they do look a bit well. Clean.
But if I just take you back as well, there's something else. Children's emigration home. It's the other major change. Now, before I talk about that, can I just mention it wasn't just in terms of the logo. I do think that Campbell was really, really good at rebranding and knowing how to do it. He wrote lots of letters to the newspapers, so there was lots of his views, lots of his ideas. But if you notice how he phrases them, who can stand before the pleading look of a hungry, uncared-for boy or girl in want of help? The downcast appearance and sad smile of innocence should melt the hardest hearts. It is for these little ones we plead. Sounds a bit cloying to our tastes, doesn't it? Day after day we are grieved in heart when we look upon the poor little trembling forms of children uncared for, and in some cases utterly homeless and without a friend. I won't read them all. But he used this a lot. This was part of the branding, and it was effective. It hit people in the heart. It hit people in the wallet. People would get the money out. Have you noticed, though, that does not fit with a child who's coming from a court. You can't, if you've got a child who's pilfering or whatever and they're in front of the beak and the beak wants to send them to the home, that child isn't going to fit that type of image of the poor, innocent, lost little. So one of the problems with children that had anything to do with the court is they did not fit Campbell's brand. And I will talk about immigration in a minute. Do you remember me saying that Locke's first act was a little bit messy, and he was in the process of tidying it up in 1883 when Russell died? The second act that came out I find very curious. I won't bore you with too much detail. But the act is called the Reformatory and Industrial Schools Manx Children Act. But the only time the reformatory gets mentioned in the very last line, where it says, in the constructions of sections 36 and 37 of the Act of 81, the original one, the word certified industrial school shall include reformatory school. Does anybody else have the feeling I have that that looks like it's just been tacked on? That they've worked on it and then somebody has arrived and said, the home will not be taking children from the courts, you need to do something else. Can't be sure. But in 1884 it became legal to send a Manx child to a reformatory. Now, I mentioned before about the Campbell being committed to emigration. Are you familiar with the Manx children who were sent to Canada? From 1884, Campbell himself had been working at the Quarrier homes. William Quarrier, sorry, just by Glasgow, you might be familiar with it. Quarrier had a village for children, but part of what he did was to set up an emigration scheme for children. Children were sent to Canada in large groups. They went to clearing centres. Marchmont, there's another one, Bellary, but I'm not sure. Thank you, Bell, that's the one, thank you. And then farmers from across, this Ontario, farmers from across Ontario, you know Canada at that point was slowly opening up under agriculture. The farmers, the poor farmers would come, the children would line up, sing a hymn, and the farmers would pick a child according to the letters of the time. The child would go away. Too big a story to deal with in this stage. I'm sure Kerry will at some point perhaps open that up for you a little bit more. If we're going to be blunt, I would say basically the children were just labour. That's what Campbell was used to, and as soon as he arrived, he was keen to make the home into a transit point for Glasgow and then on to Canada. And Canadians were getting a bit nervous about children from reformatories, and what they said was the children that are just being dumped. So you can see there were a number of reasons why Campbell would not want to have children that weren't your lovely little innocent ones. I don't know, perhaps somebody can correct me, but I'm not sure we can be sure how many children were being sent about this time. I don't know whether the records are detailed enough. There were some children who did go to the courts between 1884 and 1890. This little James Roney, it says he went to a home in Scotland. He then went on to Canada. We know because he found his way back. There are some who are, it's got HMS Mars on the Tay, and I suspect that's what this one is. The Mars was on the Tay, it was an industrial school that was a ship. And of course you can see the Quarrier link, the Campbell link. It was Campbell who had the contacts to get the children there. That was with parental with approval. That wasn't the reformatory sentence exactly. Some children are still getting birched. They did mention a reformatory, but no reformatory would accept a child for 2 years. So I suspect that the magistrate might have said that, but it probably wouldn't have happened. But as you can see, there's a few children still going to the industrial home, Whether they stayed there or whether they then went on to Canada, I can't be sure. By 1890, the home had decided that it was not good. By 1885, it was making it, the home itself was making a statement that it would not accept any children, it would not accept one farthing of government money. That's quite a firm statement, isn't it? The idea about the government sending children via the courts was now at an end. Now, these are what I call my boys. These are the children who were sent to reformatories. The Akbar that I showed you before was the one of choice. Sorry, it's a bit wobbly up here. I hope it's clear enough to read there. These, I can't be sure which one they went to. Akbar was this lot. That little John Roney is the one that was James Roney before. Poor little thing. He ended up in front of the magistrate, and the magistrate said, "Didn't we send you to a reformatory?" And somebody said, "Yeah, but he was too young, so he went to the home and they sent him to Canada and he came back." But then they sent him to a reformatory. Hello. Sorry. Not at all, not at all. Is there somewhere nice for our things?
Sort of squeeze along.
The Clarence was the ship for capital. It was moored virtually next door to the Akbar. Now, children might be sentenced to the Akbar or to the Clarence and not be fit enough for 5 years on a ship. So both reformatory associations had farms. And we know some Manx children were sent to farms. There were, I know we said boys will be boys, but there are a couple of girls in there. Can anybody spot any girls' names?
Susanna?
Yep.
Margaret.
Yes. 3. I don't think it was that girls were better. I think it was probably the fact they were more supervised or that they were just handled differently. There were a couple of children who were pardoned. This little Edward Bell is the same Edward Bell who the second time they didn't pardon him, they did send him. These two here were sent to other places, orphanages and what have you. They're only here if I've got corroborated information that they definitely went. So we're talking about 40 sentences in the period where reformatories were still the place du jour. I stop at 1908 because the next child that was sent to what was technically known as a borstal. The day of the reformatories was already drawing to a close. So these were the children that weren't going to go into the home. But one thing I tried to do was to find out where the children came from. Only one didn't come from Douglas. Only one child sent to reformatory. There was one from Castletown. When I plotted them on the map though, I couldn't find all the addresses, but most of them were around the North Quay, the South Quay, Fancy Lane, Post Office Lane. A couple, it says Tynwald Street, but I'm not absolutely convinced it wasn't Tynwald Terrace, which was this area. Now, fair enough, there was more police patrolling around there, but do you think some children might have been marked, their cards marked because of where they lived and where they came from? The other thing also is the fact that there was a lot of slum clearance in this area. I know we should call it a slum, but I don't know what else you'd call the North Quay in those days, pre-sanitation. They were knocking them down from the 1890s, and they weren't rebuilding till the 1900s, and they were only rebuilding a portion of the residential accommodation they knocked down. So this was being cleared anyway. So can I just talk to you a little bit about that area where a lot of the children came from? This is the Lieutenant Governor talking. Some of the houses were in a state of utter dilapidation. Rain comes through the roof, the doors off the hinges, the glass out of the windows. And what impressed them more, though it was perhaps not the landlord's fault, was the dirt and squalor in which some people lived. Of this squalor, there was a great deal due to the unfortunate circumstances in which people lived, to the unfortunate condition of their lives and their own bad conduct. Just taking the roof off. But partly due to the commissioners, Douglas commissioners. He did not think he went into a single house where the ash pit was not full. Do you all know what an ash pit is? Pre-toilet, the hole in the floor, where you do the poo. And where they had to be emptied through the house. And when it was recollected that people were sleeping in rooms immediately above those ash pits. So there was a lot of concern about the very poor standard of housing around the North Quay where these children came from. But did you notice there's a slight sense of, well, the people living there are partly responsible as well. You know, that mixture of sanitation and moral failure. There are some lovely photographs on the Eye Museum that you can look at, and they're really, really good. I don't think, obviously they're after our time, but you might enjoy having a look at them. I've got quite a few here. Thoroughly recommended. But can I just take you back to where the boys were going? There was a training ship Conway, which was a naval training ship. The one up to 1884, 6 years before they started sending Manx children, was burnt to the waterline by the children. That's what they were sending Manx children to. Another one was eventually acquired, and that was burnt to the waterline in 1899 by the boys. Not all the boys, but you know, there must have been some sort of tough environment. They look so young. On both the ships, consistently, there was a bedwetting problem. There was always a large group of children, boys, who were bedwetters, and they got all sorts of punishment for it. And I think, considering children were at least 12, in a very male environment, okay, there might have been some physiological problems somewhere, but that tends to suggest to me that too tough an environment for some children. This photograph I like, it just makes me think of, you know, Great Expectations, Magwitch, the Hulks, which is only because it's the photograph so poor. I wouldn't want you to think that I think that the reformatory was meant to be horrible. I do feel that the people in charge of the reformatory ships, both of these, were making a sincere effort, but they were rotting hulks, and it was a tough environment. You put 200 children, 200 boys together for 5 years. You're going to get a load of the flies going on anyway, aren't you? You've got a very, very tough discipline. For example, during the time that our boys were there, they allowed local boys to go home. They had 14 days in the year they could go home. And if you were a country boy from a distance away, you were allowed to go for 14 days holiday. And the commander of the Akbar talks with regret how he had to flog a boy who was late coming back from the country. And he said, it's so bad because the child was on a train that was delayed. It was not his fault, but he was late, and therefore he had to be flogged. I said, oh, come on. I'm sure some people did okay. I think some children probably gave them some stability, it gave them a training, they joined the Merchant Navy, they were on their way. So I don't want to be too simplistic about this. But for the Manx boys, I don't know quite what it would have been like. Would you like to meet one of my boys? I know I've gone on a little bit. I haven't got any children's photographs. The best chance of finding a photograph is a police mugshot, I'm afraid, unless you're really lucky and meet somebody like Ernie Mellon who can help you with your research. This is Joseph Crimble. He was born in 1888, and his parents were known vagrants. I hate to use the label, but they were consistently in court for vagrancy. A couple of times the parents were arrested and he was sent to the home as a very small child, you know, sort of 7, 8, 9-year-old. He was sent to the home in 1897, so he would have been about 9, because his parents had been arrested. He was obviously out quite soon. His parents were arrested again, and the next time he was sent to the Poor Asylum in 1899. That same year he was arrested himself for stealing a jacket, caps and a handkerchief. And he was sentenced to the reformatory. I think perhaps because he was not big and not robust, he actually went to the farm school in Ainsdale rather than the ship itself. I don't know what happened to his time on the ship. I don't know when he came back, but he was back on the island by 1907. He was lodging in an unoccupied house in Shaw's Brow with his father and a girl, and it was noted that he was pale and emaciated in appearance. He had a couple of coins in his pocket, and you couldn't be jailed for vagrancy if you had coins in your pocket, but he passed them to the girl so that she would escape jail, and he got a month. The next year he was jailed for stealing an oilskin coat. What had happened was he sold a coat, and the policeman said he must have stolen the coat in the first place because it was in such good nick since he lived rough. He said he'd not had the coat long, he'd had to sell it because he needed the money, but he still got jailed, 2 months this time. 1912 he was arrested for begging. He said he and a friend had gone to one of the poor law guardians in Douglas asking for help. For some reason the poor law guardian had taken it amiss, called the police, said they were drunk and harassing him, and he got arrested and jailed for begging. 1913 he was arrested, and I've got to read this. He is arrested for being a suspected person frequenting a lane with intent. At that point, even the chairman of the bench was critical of the police for arresting him. They jailed him, but they said the next time he's brought upon this, the poor devil should be left alone, and if the police arrest him again on such a charge, he would dismiss it. But he didn't this time, he still jailed him. In 1914, he was stealing car parts, and he got 6 months hard labour. I'm not quite sure that he would have had the robust physique for hard labour, quite frankly. And as you possibly can see, he died in 1921. So he didn't live long. That's one of my boys. I don't know whether the reformatory helped him, hindered him, or did anything for him.
Not conscripted then?
No. I suspect physically just not.
Oh, that's it.
So you've been very patient, but let me suggest that I think by 1890 certain groups of children had become inconvenient. They often came from neighbourhoods that had a despoiled identity. You know, oh, children from that area, you know what they're like. Because of immigration, the removal of children had become a norm. It was normalised. And certain economic and political interests were served. I think there was a lot of interest in getting the North Quay cleared because it was far too close to where the tourists were coming in and the crossing to Douglas Head and what have you. It was too close to the people they wanted to show a very nice picture of Douglas. I would suggest that at least some of the children were the terror of the neighbourhood. But in terms of them, whether they were boys being boys or whether they were juvenile delinquents, I don't want to make it too simplistic, but I'd like to suggest that partly it was being in the wrong time, any time after 1890, and in the wrong place, Douglas, particularly by the quays.
Further questions, and I'm sure there probably are when you think about it, that you join us for a cup of tea downstairs and have a chat with Sue there.
That's a good idea.
Sue, that was absolutely fascinating and quite harrowing and sad to think that really on the whim of one man, Manx law could change so substantially. And thank goodness we don't do things like that anymore. Thank you very much. That's absolutely fascinating.
Thank you, John.